So, how long do you string things out before you finally get to the point? This is a problem with comics today. It's kind of the opposite end of the problem of comics being canceled in 4 issues. So, let's talk about the other side for a change. Hey there, this is Perch. You know, so much is said about comics being canceled in 4 issues, 6 issues, that, these writers don't get a chance to tell their story and decompression and on it goes. But there is another side to it, and you don't see it as much anymore, but it does exist. And this is how long do you want to stretch out the story before it eventually collapses in on itself? And, this is a criticism of Tom King's Batman. But let's not talk about Tom King as much. Everybody talks about Tom King. Let's throw out some other examples because there's other people who do this too. And so when people kind of focus on Tom King, it becomes about Tom King and not about the practice of kind of very long form decompressed storytelling. So let's talk about a little bit about Bendis. Let's go back in time and talk about Chris Claremont and some of these other runs. Let's talk about there's been some Spider. Let's talk about Dan Slott's Spider-Man back in the day. So so I am a fan of big runs. I'm a fan of a writer and an artist team being on a comic for a long time. I think it's great. In today's world, that's just isn't the way the business works anymore, and it's sad. Makes me sad. All my feels are sad. I cry mournfully into the rain with my umbrella, looking out into the distance as the fog slowly drifts up from the street, sipping my soy latte and pondering the existence of humanity and where it's going as I weep into my comic book, the ink running down the page like my own tears, slowly falling onto the street below where they will briefly leave a mark, but ultimately be washed away into nothingness. Sorry, I'm sorry. Got away from myself. You know what's a shame to me is people have overused the soy thing so much, and the original joke, for what it's worth, as a guy living in Coffee Town, I think I can say officially, the original joke was just soy was a more complex order. Like you would say, I would like my soy latte half sweet with half a pump of vanilla and light on coconut sprinkles with a you would go into this elaborate goofy comic coffee order, and soy was usually a part of it because it made the whole thing funnier. And now soy has taken on new meaning, and it's been adopted all the rest. It's taken away that joke, whereas it was originally just somebody making an overly complex coffee. My mind's on comics. Go figure. Coffee order. I mean, that's what it was for. The joke's been ruined. Anyway, the comic book. I like my long stories. I like a writer and artist team that's going to be along for a long time, or at least a writer who's got a big game and is not trying to shove everything out all at once. But that does not mean decompressed storytelling. I don't want to have an entire issue with the Avengers in a hot tub. That's not. That sounds good on paper. Well, I don't know. It does not sound good on paper, but to some, maybe it sounds good on paper, but it's not a good idea. I disagree. I object. But I like, the Chris Claremont, even though, and we're getting to it, there were a lot of criticisms about kind of so many plates spinning in the air for so long that it kind of kills the story. I liked that feeling like I was part of a multi-year story. I liked the fact that I was reading something that might get paid off 3 years from now, and that we were going to have this build that would be epic when it finally hit. The anticipation growing and growing and growing. But in fairness, at the time there was a lot of criticism about Claremont going so decompressed. A lot of people say he was decompressed. He was definitely not decompressed because Claremont was doing payoffs, issue by issue. He just had enough subplots going that he could make every few months a payoff to a storyline, and you'd have action and you'd have characters progressing issue to issue. The X-Men in this issue might have a little 4-issue arc in Genosha, and then they'd be off fighting the Brood, and then they'd be over here, and there was stuff always happening, but then it was also leading to big things that would get paid off. I remember the Brood kind of coming to Earth was like a good year before they paid that story off, and that was awesome. That was what I loved. So I think that's great. But there was criticism about it. There was the he's stretching it out too far. And then along came more modern writers, in particular Slott and Bendis, who really kind of were going to be on a title for a long time, and so they teed things up. And I think Slott did a much better job than Bendis of not having things stretched so far that you kind of lose the plot, so to speak. He did Slott delivered on some payoffs. And it's well, it's an interesting thing about comics, and I guarantee you, there's some statements I just know as I'm saying them, it will get the downvote. And if you compliment people, like if you go on and say, I think Mark Waid has some good storytelling technique, downvote instantly. You can't say something like that without also bringing up, yeah, and he's also a complete jerk, and I hate him. They're just something that's true. Slott, generally speaking, and he definitely stretched the rubber band too far in terms of. I think that's a good analogy, by the way. If you think about a story, if you just have a rubber band and you don't do anything, it's just this floppy piece of rubber sitting there on a table. It's not very interesting, not much use. So you want to stretch that rubber band. You want to stretch and stretch and stretch, and then you're starting to build some tension, and it's suddenly a valuable thing. You can put paper in there and bind it. But if you stretch that rubber band so far, either it's going to pop on yourself, you won't be able to hold it anymore if you've got weak fingers, or it will break and snap. It will basically, if you stretch it too far, bad things happen. And that's the problem with long form storytelling is if you're not careful, you just stretch and stretch and stretch. And then eventually you've lost track of what's going on. Your readers don't know what's happening, and it just you don't pay things off, and then when the payoffs finally come, it just comes kind of out of nowhere. And I think again, my opinion, personal opinion, I think Claremont did a wonderful job of juggling these things, and I think Dan Slott did a decent job of he did let things stretch on too far, but he would kind of deliver on those payoffs, and the delivery was okay, not perfect. I think the Doc Ock as Spider-Man thing, kind of the lead up to him, quote unquote, dying, and then the him as Spider-Man, both those things. The him as Spider-Man went on maybe a bit long, but still there was a sense of a payoff. There was a sense of some tension. It all kind of worked. I think the Peter Parker is rich, a Bill Gates type character, that didn't work really at all, and kind of it never built the tension properly, and then the his tech being misused, and kind of the fall of Peter and then the whole Red Goblin with some carnage, that stuff just was more, it didn't establish that tension well either. He pulled it out too far, like the Big Time storyline. I guess there's a different storyline called Big Time. I'm talking about Peter is a rich tech billionaire. That part was that he expanded some tension, and then it never delivered right. He's in a relationship with Mockingbird, and it's like, Aunt May is like a tech ambassador. I mean, just a lot of concepts there that just didn't work, and then the tension stretched out. But so and Bendis, I think with his Avengers run, if you compare Bendis's Avengers run to Hickman's Avengers run, so Bendis's he also kind of in very Claremont fashion threw a lot of stuff up, but some of it just never got paid off, or it got paid off super weird. Like the Ultron storyline was a big, played up thing, and then it was kind of forgotten for a while, and then they hit Age of Ultron, and that was a storyline that then we had a really cool concept with Ultron, but then we just kind of gave up on it. We decided to do time travel instead, and it was a lesson on what happens when Wolverine changes things in the past. That's bad. And then you have then kind of back to that whole thing. Just it stretched to the point that it became janky. Just use that word. And same thing with kind of the death of the Wasp and some of the other elements. Just I think an example of good Bendis, the Secret Invasion storyline. He teased it for, I want to say, a good year before that played out. And that was done really well. It created some interesting kind of dynamic in his titles, and I thought, it stretched the tension out, and then it came together in a nice way. The event itself, I thought was, less good than the lead up to the event. I think the lead up to the event was pretty spot on, and then the actual event itself played out kind of lame. I think Bendis always has problems with the second act. He has a good kind of interesting lead up in the first act, and then the second act is like what WTF, and then the third act is kind of hit or miss depending on how damaging the second act was. But anyway, but that's kind of that's the idea of you got a concept, you want to stretch it out. I think it's a good thing that you build some tension, much better than kind of just writing kind of a go nowhere storyline for 6 issues and being canceled. I like writers for a long time doing big things and having a big plan. I think that was that's the thing I objected to most in Sobolski's kind of tweet he did about the topic many weeks ago. Is writers should have a big plan and they should pull out all the stops, and the publisher should give them the confidence that, hey, we are going to stick with this comic. We're going to make sure, first of all, and I think this is it, you have to be the right person for the job. So we're going to put you on Avengers because we vetted you. We think you're a good writer. You know what you're doing. You provided some pitches that actually we market tested a little bit. And they sound good, and so we were careful about giving you the job. We didn't just put some weirdo in the job. So we put a good person in the job, and then now we're going to give you some confidence that barring the company going out of business or Disney coming in and killing all of us, you're going to be on this comic for 50 issues. So let's make them count. Let's have you tell a big story. I think you can do that. I mean, you cannot do that if the comic is, I don't know, Miss Marvel's friend. Nobody knows if that comic's going to sell or survive at all. But if it's Avengers, Captain America, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor, I mean, Captain Marvel, a lot of these titles, X-Men for sure, you should be able to go into it and say, you know what? We want you to do this for 50 issues. We're going to give you some job security. We're going to make sure that that you can tell the story you want to tell, and it's got to have big moments. And but you have to sell us that when given that time, you're not going to screw it up. You're going to do a good job with it. And if the fan reaction is just if you tell the story and we were all wrong, and the fans revolt, and your comic plummets from 100,000 copies sold to 2, then yeah, we're all getting fired. At that point, the editor is getting fired, the writer's getting fired. I think actually there should be more of the, look, if we vet you and we put you onto this book and then it blows up, it does terrible and nobody likes that book, then yeah, you as the writer, the creator, the creative team, you're going to be taken off the book. But guess what? So's the editor. So's the jackass who hired you, who said, yeah, this is a good idea. I mean, we all have skin in the game. I think that's one element of other businesses, other industries where and it depends. Like if there's plenty of tech companies where the engineers or the game companies where the good old engineers develop a great game. They work really hard on it. They put all this time out, and then the game flops, and the engineers are all fired. But the managers get to keep their job and their stock and everything. Screw that. Like if there's got to be some responsibility from the people up top. You put people in that position, it doesn't go well, and it's not like the writer suddenly got a cocaine addiction and started being a maniac or fondled everybody in the office or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, that doesn't reflect on the editor, unless there was a track record of the past 30 years of this guy being a pervert, like the Border Towns guy, Border Town guy, not Towns. There's again proper vetting. If you don't do your proper vetting, the person who's supposed to be doing the vetting has some explaining to do, and maybe a new job is in order. I think, yeah, let's be merciless about it. I mean, look, if if a comic shop is run poorly, the owner of the comic shop is the guy whose head's on the block. The woman whose head's on the block, whoever it is, it's buck stops there. Anyway, we kind of got off track. I think long form stories are great. I think there's such a thing though as stretching that band too far. I think bringing Tom King back into the mix for a second, I think that's been the problem with Batman, is he had a big story to tell, and he wanted to really kind of disintegrate Batman so he could be built back up, so we could see kind of a challenge Batman has to face that's both internal and external. That's, that good on paper, but it just, there's like 20 issues, maybe too many in that story of you got to keep the reader engaged, believing that there was going to be an upswing, and if you lose them, yeah, you lose them, and they were lost. So there's your problem. Um, and again, I think we can all be mad at Tom King, but seriously, what was the editor doing? Why did the editor like, yeah, let's do this Nightmares? Let's go ahead and do this 8 issue night, whatever. Let's go ahead and do this long Nightmares arc in the middle of all this. The editor's like, hey, we're starting to see some negative reaction from people online. Hey, maybe, and this, I think Tom King deserves, a bunch of credit's the wrong word, but um, when the Batman wedding issue came out, Tom King, and you can look it up. I think tweets were deleted, but the history is there. Somebody's archived it. He was like, maybe DC chill a little bit with the wedding stuff. I mean, Tom King likes to quote unquote bat and switch stuff, but I think even Tom King was like, oh, hang on a second, this is going to piss people off. And I think part of the whole bodyguard at Comic Con, some of that kind of stuff was a little bit of a stunt, but I think it was also a little bit of a message to DC, like, hey, jackass, I'm writing this story, and we all knew this was gonna be a switcheroo in the end, and you were doing I don't remember, was it Dan Didio? Somebody, I think it was Didio, was like, nope, 100%, you are definitely getting a wedding. It's like, woo, let's leave ourselves a little crack in the door. Let's not say things like that. I think in King's defense, whether you like his writing or don't like his writing, another person that has some splaining to do, as they say, is the editors and the people in charge. I mean, you guys ran with this. You can all say, oh, his vision didn't fit our comics, so we're going to remove him from this title, which isn't what happened. But anyway, there needs to be a little, hey, were you guys all asleep at the wheel while this was going on? Were you not paying attention to the feedback and the commentary and the anger over the wedding, and then the long depressing arc for 25 issues? Were you not paying attention to this? Because it's been a year. It's been a good year now of sad Bruce, and you guys said that was okay. You, the editors, you said own up. Anyway, what do you think? Long storylines. Do you like them? Pain, new reader, terrible? I'm using lots of just words by themselves. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Would love to hear from you. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and follow me on Twitter, Comic Perch. Thank you for listening.